that?
I forgot all about it, Jeff.
I put it by the back door.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's just that's where it was.
Thank you. Carol had to tell me, hey, sit down. I'm standing after everybody sat down and everything. Carol went, sit down. My head is not where it's supposed to be.
Well, we'll drop him off somewhere anyways.
Yeah. No, that's important. Thank you. I would have. You wanted to say this for him.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing what Pastor Wood has to say.
Yeah. They hit a little bit. They hit the religious editor on camera, like you talked about. Insurgent of growth of religion because of the virus.
Oh,
And of course, they said the Catholics disclose whatever everyone else follows. The percentage of groups, all that's not fair to them either.
yeah.
right, where'd Pastor go? All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah? Yeah, yeah. Right. I'm thinking that the more I read that particular story, the unclean man from the gospel reading, what did the people do? Seems to me that it looked probably pretty normal. It probably just looked like some guy standing up and going, "Hold on a minute, preacher. This is all wrong." And so I don't know if Jesus recognized that the spirit was unclean. I wonder if the people who were there recognized that the spirit was unclean until Jesus cast him out. And then he was dealt with, so. Oh yeah, the people heard that. Yeah, because the people comment how Jesus has the authority and power over the unclean spirits. But until Jesus makes the spirit convulse and the spirit leaves with a loud scream, really it's just some guy confronting Jesus, which happens all the time, right? With simple words. And then all of a sudden he's convulsing and screaming, and the people realize what happened. All right. Before I get distracted by the Bible. All right. Anyone listening online, thank you for joining us. I don't have a screen or anything like that. So if you're online, I'm assuming that you can go onto the internet because you're watching through the internet. On my website, theseaside.asia, THESEASIDE.asia, no .coms, no .orgs, theseaside.asia. You can get this handout. It's on the home page, and it's called the Special Presentation Edition of the Seaside. So you can get this handout as a PDF and follow along on your computer if you're watching online. That being said, these were in your bulletins. So this is kind of my standard presentation. I'm used to being taken down tangents, so we don't have to follow this rigidly, but this is what I have. So, all right. I have until, Pastor Nava said I had until 2 in the afternoon. We can order some lunch. Mm-hmm. All right. All right, well, let's begin with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for the ministry of your Son and bringing to light your salvation, your rule and your reign, your kingdom, a kingdom that operates with forgiveness and mercy and grace. Enliven our hearts to be a forgiven people who forgive, and help us to see in this ministry in Indonesia the importance of proclaiming that forgiving message to the rest of the world, even as we do so in our own communities and in our own families. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago almost, accepted the call to serve in Indonesia, and we moved to Indonesia in May of 2018. The years are getting, the May of, when did we move there, Callie? May of 2019, right? Yeah, May of 2019. So, if anyone needs one of these, Callie, get Callie's attention and she'll give you one. All right. So one thing that I have to say at the beginning is throughout this presentation and whenever I talk about the ministry in Indonesia, I avoid the word missionary because missionaries are outlawed in Indonesia. That doesn't mean what I do in Indonesia is illegal. It just means that when Indonesia, the government and the immigration offices and all that, when they hear the word missionary, they think of someone who's going to come in and start a new church. That's not what we're doing. We are working with a church that's already in Indonesia, and we are really letting that church be the leader in the ministry of Indonesia and helping where we can, and as our strengths can contribute to their work, we want that to happen. So we are not starting a new church. We're not starting a new denomination. We're not going in and taking control of a church body or anything like that. So what the best way to describe our ministry is just, I'm a pastor in Indonesia. Or in prayers or in bulletins, an international worker. Right? Especially now as we ran into some visa issues related to COVID regulations. So we're reapplying for the visa, and it's important to not have missionary attached to our name, online especially, social media, things like that. So international worker. We want to respect the language and expectations of the Indonesian government, and so international worker, not missionary. All right? All right, so a review on the left-hand side of that handout in the gray box is just some Indonesia fast facts. Their flag, the Merah Putih, that's red and white. 267 million people, that's the fourth largest population in the world. Who has the largest population in the world? China, second. India, third. U.S., fourth. Indonesia. Yep. Larger than Russia, yep. Yep. So, let's see. 328 trillion U.S. dollars is their gross domestic product. So, as far as wealth of the country goes, they're right up there. You know, seventh largest. That's a top-tier economy. That's a powerful economy. But if you look at their per capita, that is how much each person would, you know, if you just gave evenly distributed the GDP amongst the population, how much each person would have, it's 12,345, which is 95th, right? So you go from a powerful economy just based on dollar amount, but then when you take into consideration the number of people and what the average person has, it drops down to 95th, which is really quite poor. Right? So what you have in Indonesia is a very big gap between the classes, wealthy and poor. It is an incredible, incredible gap. All right? Most of the people we work with are quite poor. The members of the church we work with, Gereja Christian Luther Indonesia, the Indonesian Christian Lutheran Church, is recognized by many international church bodies, the Lutheran World Federation, the Australian Lutheran Church of Australia, and the United Churches of Indonesia, three organizations that have all, as I've been talking with their leadership, they have all said that this church we work with, the GKLI, ministers to some of the poorest of the poor in Indonesia. So it really is ministry to those who are in a great amount of poverty. What's phenomenal in this ministry is lots of poverty, but also a tremendous amount of joy from the people. Very, very content, and not it doesn't seem to me that they are bitter or angry with their situation. They are content and express joy in their day-to-day lives as they go about in Indonesia, which is really quite remarkable. And so that's one thing. You know, you go as an international worker from the U.S. to Indonesia, and what do you expect to do? Teach, give, dispense, right? And we, at least I, learned a lot, have been learning a lot about the contentment and joy that comes in the tremendous poverty that these people are living in. All right. Official language, Bahasa Indonesia, but there are in Indonesia over 700 living languages. 700 living languages. And now the question I often get asked right away is, yeah, but how many of those are just different dialects and they're all related, and you can, if you speak Spanish, you can pretty much understand Italian, that kind of a thing. So what's going on with that? Yeah, there are a lot of languages and dialects that are related in that number, 700. As far as unique languages that don't have a relation to each other, right? 235 unique language families in Indonesia. I read that 10% of all the languages in the world, 10% of them are in Indonesia. It's just a huge amount of languages. And Indonesia is an archipelago with 17,508 islands. All right, so you can understand how the isolation of the people and the tribes created this situation of all these languages. All right? And this has a huge impact on what we are doing in Indonesia, because in 1949, Indonesia gained independence. It's a fun story. You've heard of World War II, right? Right? Okay, so Indonesia during World War II was occupied by Japan. And Japan was pretty soundly defeated by America in World War II. And so Indonesia, after Japan is completely annihilated, Indonesia's like, I think we're free now. I think we're free now. And the Netherlands tried to come in and reestablish authority. They used to be a colony of the Netherlands. And there was a little bit of fighting, but ultimately they got their independence in 1949. And in 1949, they in order to help unite the people of Indonesia, they declared, they decided that there would be one official language in Indonesia, and that is Bahasa Indonesia. And this language is new for everyone. They didn't take what most people spoke, which would have been Javanese. 48% of the people spoke Javanese. They were interested in uniting Indonesia, and that meant everyone's kind of got to learn new. And so they modified Malay and created Bahasa Indonesia, and since 1949, that's been their standard language. And so the government, your birth certificates, marriage certificates, passport applications, the government operates in Bahasa Indonesia. The news is in Bahasa Indonesia. The public schools have to operate in Bahasa Indonesia at a certain grade level. It switches over to Bahasa Indonesia. And so what's going to happen as the culture unites around one language? What's the expected result? The people unite around one language. And how many languages are let me rephrase it. So there's 700 languages that are being actively spoken. Do you think that is going to increase or decrease over time once there's an official language that the government and the TV is operating in? Right. It's decreasing. So every generation, the number of people who speak only Indonesian is increasing. Right? The number of people who who can only speak one language, and that is Bahasa Indonesia, is going up. All right? Now, also expected, and this is not a dig, this is just a reality. What area of life do you think is the last area of life to change from the tribal languages to the official government language? Church life. So the churches, the Christian churches, largely still operate in the old languages, grandma's language. So all kinds of different languages. You go to work, you watch the TV, you go to the store, it's all Bahasa Indonesia, but when you go to church, that's Batak, at least where we are. Batak is the predominant language. The GKLI, Gereja Christian Luther Indonesia, the church body we're working with, they're historically a Batak people, predominantly a Batak tribe. And so they've been, their churches predominantly as Batak. In the city of Medan, where we live, a city of 3 million people, there is a church that does 2 Bahasa Indonesia services a month. But otherwise, it's all Batak. Gary. Okay, so the question for anyone online is, did we have to learn 2 languages, Batak and Bahasa Indonesia? The answer is no, just Bahasa Indonesia, yeah. I know like 4 words in Batak, and I've probably forgotten a couple of them. But horas in Batak is hello. It's the equivalent to the Hawaiian aloha. And then muliate is thank you. Those are the only things I know. But, yeah, so we did, good question. So Callie and I spent 10 months in intensive language learning from May. We got there, and 4 days later, we were starting our language learning from May of 2019 to March of 2020. We did take a break. Caroline was born in Medan. So we took 2 months off from language classes, but otherwise it was intensive language learning, and they expected 6 hours a day out of us. They wanted 2 hours in class, which was entirely in Bahasa Indonesia. The first day of class, we went in and they handed us some paper and they said, these are some questions in Indonesian that you're going to have to become familiar with, right? Apa kata untuk, what's the word for? And then you say the English. Or apa artinya, apa arti kata ini, right? What's the meaning of this word? And so they used English to teach us those sentences, and from then on, it was Bahasa Indonesia. And if we were having a really tough time and just agitated and they could tell that we were about to strangle each other, then they might switch to English and help us out. But they really did expect, from that point on, 100% Bahasa Indonesia. And it worked. I mean, we do quite well in Bahasa Indonesia. I wouldn't say we're fluent, but we don't need English in our conversations. We can kind of get to an understanding in Bahasa Indonesia. But like I said, our last day was March 27th, 2020. The day that Indonesia closed because of those COVID-19 regulations. And it's pretty difficult to learn a language when everyone's wearing a mask and talking like this. It's just so difficult to understand. Right? So, one of the things when we get back, we're going to probably spend a few weeks back at that language school trying to get, not just helping strengthen our language again. Yeah. B. Howard? Sure. Again, the COVID regulations didn't help. We had planned to, so the question for those online is, how are our girls, our daughters, doing? And with Bahasa Indonesia. They have done remarkably well with moving to Indonesia, and they adapted as well as can be expected. For a while, anytime someone started speaking in Indonesian, Eleanor would start screaming over them and like making just rude noises like and things like that. So, but eventually, we got used to life there. They got used to life there. And as far as acquiring the language, we wanted to send Eleanor to an Indonesian preschool when she was of age. And she got there April 2020. And all the schools were closed, or, it was online learning, but for preschool, no. Laurel, our language school, has classes for kids, 7 years and above. She turned 7 in May of 2020. And so those classes weren't available. So as far as adapting to the language, it's been frustrating, but we're confident that we can still get there. Eleanor pretty much understands Indonesian. She'll respond in English. If our helper, we have someone who helps watch the kids and cook and clean. If our helper says something in Indonesian, she can basically get the gist of it and respond. Caroline knows Indonesian. She can. She doesn't speak English or Indonesian at the moment, but she hears and responds to both. So I try to speak to Caroline entirely in Indonesian, for my own language, and then also to keep her languages up. She is much more obedient when I give her commands in Bahasa Indonesia. She's much more obedient than when I do it in English. So I don't know what that means, other than that's just the reality. Yep. Yeah. Although Eleanor is cute, because Eleanor, if she sees that you're paying attention to and you understand her, you're hooked now. You can't, she will talk your ear off. And it'll just stream of consciousness. If she notices an adult paying attention to her, that can also understand how she speaks. Yeah, she locks in. Yeah. So, all right. Questions so far? All right. So, one of the things on this, still on the left-hand side of the front page, is the religious breakdown. 86.7% Islam. Okay? A lot of times, you will hear me talk about the majority religion in Indonesia. It's just a softer, more polite way to say that, especially when you're talking about the proclamation of the gospel and resistance to the proclamation of the gospel. The majority religion in Indonesia is not familiar with a true forgiveness of sins. Right? That is, we talked about that in the sermon a little bit. That's what's new to them, is the forgiveness of sins. Feeding the poor, they're used to that, right? Building a church or a mosque, or having a holy worship place, that's familiar to them, right? Being a good neighbor, helping take out the trash, or as we do in Medan, helping someone burn their trash, they're familiar with that, right? All of those, being a good person, right? They're familiar with that. Defending marriage, family values, they're familiar with that. What's new is when you get into the realm of the forgiveness of sins. All right? And the very unique thing about Medan, even in Indonesia, it's unique to Medan, I think it's more unique to Medan anyway, is one of the first things you do when you meet with someone is talk about your religion. That's just, so what do? You meet someone new, you're in a taxi, or you're on a bus, or you're standing in line at the grocer, and what do you say? Yeah, well, St. Louis, thank you. Yeah, where'd you go to high school? All right, but the rest of the world, or the rest of America, right? What's that? Yes, exactly. What do you do for a living? Or if you don't even want to get that involved, it's, nice day outside. you know what they say, if you don't like the weather, wait around 15 minutes and it'll change, right? And you just kind of banter about the weather. That's a very safe, easy conversation to have still, right, in the U.S. Very normal. That's kind of our small talk. The thing about the weather in Indonesia is it never changes. Ever. Right? It's a very consistent pattern. Right? Is it going to rain for 10 minutes today or for 12 minutes today? I mean, it is not going to change. And so their small talk, their kind of getting to know you conversation starts with, how old are you? How old are you? And then based on their age, are you already married? If yes, how many kids do you have? If no, why not? All right. How many kids do you have? If there's a number, how old? Yeah, boys or girls? How old? What class are they in? If no kids yet, why not? Right? So you're already getting into the realm of things that you don't really talk about in America. And so that was it wasn't just learning the words, it was learning to be comfortable asking a 25-year-old girl who's standing there, why aren't you married yet? So weird. Yeah, but these are the things. Oh, and so they make us go out, and part of language learning, you have to go out 2 hours a day and talk with people. So it doesn't matter who they are, just go to the park, find someone, and start talking. All right, this is another thing that you can do. You see two people, they're obviously on a date. Hey, how are you? Are you married yet? No, we're not married yet. Why not? When? Right? And so it's just you can see the cultural inertia that just moves people into families and having families. But after you get through with the family and the kids, the next question is, what tribe are you, and what religion are you? And very, very open to discussing and asking questions about religion. Very, very open to it. And so I regularly talk to taxi drivers, and taxi drivers are nice because they can't leave. They can't, yeah. And they also have to pay attention to the road, so they can't be pinching my daughter's cheeks. That's the other difficulty. At the park, everyone wants to be taking pictures with the kids, and it's hard to get a conversation in. But taxi drivers are there, and they have to face forward, and you can. Anyway, so I talk a lot with them about hell, and what do Muslims believe about hell? How do we know? How do you know if you're going to hell or heaven and things like that? And interesting to find out, hell is not an eternal destination. In at least the Indonesian expression of the Muslim religious life, and you just don't know whether you're going to serve time there or not, or how much time or whatever. You just don't know, because it's really at the end of the day up to Allah, and we just hope that He's merciful. And this is not a Christian hope, right? The Christian hope is a sure and certain expectation, like I hope the sun will rise tomorrow, right? Even if it's behind the clouds, I know it actually did. Like that hope isn't. I'm not really uncertain whether or not the sun is going to rise tomorrow, right? Either the sun will rise tomorrow or the Son of God will be our light. That one of those two things is going to happen, right? So the Christian hope is an expectation. And what I hear from conversations with the people who are not Christian in Indonesia is their hope is much more of a, I hope COVID goes away soon, right? Just kind of a deep yearning or a deep desire, but no certainty. Right? Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, it's illegal. In Indonesia, you have to be a member of one of these five. On the bottom here, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism. You must belong to one of these religions. It's on every government form. What is your religion? You go to the hospital, you need a vaccine, passport, driver's license, birth certificate, what have you. They're always asking, what is your religion? There's a couple of reasons for that. One is different religions have different customs, different dietary things, and they want to be hospitable. If you're a Muslim in the hospital, they make sure to serve you the appropriate food. Or if you're a Hindu, they assume you're a vegetarian, and they want to honor and respect the individual's way of life. One of the other reasons, which I love, is that Indonesia was having some problems with communists, right? Post-World War II, Cold War, right? And they thought, I'm serious, they thought, what better way to get rid of the communists than make everyone join a religion? And it worked. Yes, Elaine. Jewish is not on there. Nope. That is not allowed. Mormons are not considered Christian, and they are not allowed. Although I have run into some who are there. So they're getting around the rules, but Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed, Scientology not allowed. And so they don't have freedom of religion. Right now, if you're asking me to be honest, I would prefer, a freedom of religion, right? Because you really got to stay in the good graces of the government, right? But it does have its advantages. No Scientology is a huge advantage for any country, I guarantee you, right? So it does have its advantages, all right? Yeah. Well, this 0.04% other, especially on the island of Papua, Papua New Guinea is half of the island. The other half is just Papua, and it's part of Indonesia. So the eastern portions of the country, there are a lot of ancestral pagan type religions, and they're pretty kind of look the other way on that if it's not new and from the outside, and it's kind of in your tradition, they're kind of look the other way. You'll see on a lot of religious breakdown maps, the eastern part of Indonesia is very, very Christian, according to people's government forms. But what happens a lot is these ancestral religions try and get themselves under the umbrella of Christianity, right? And they still have their pagan animal worship type practices. So that does happen. All right. So one of the things we want to do as we go to Indonesia, in my presentations before we left, I always said, listen. We need to listen. We're not going in for answers, or we're not going in with answers. We're not going in as saviors. We're not going in, to tell them this is how you make a church, right? We want to listen, and we want to respond to the situation in Indonesia. So this front page is mostly just things that the church body that we work with is doing and how they are responding to needs that they see. So Medan, that's where we live. That's the biggest city. That's the closest large city to the central offices of the GKLI. 2.209 million people. Depending on how you define metropolitan area, you might be able to get up to 3.5 million. You might see something like that about Indonesia. There is an international airport, so we have ready access to Indonesia and the rest of the world. About 90 miles away is the GKLI office. It's in a small town called Sihabang-Habang, and which is the Batak word for wings and flying. 49 pastors, 100 congregations and preaching stations, and they're our closest collaborators in accomplishing the work of the gospel in Indonesia. Now, a church body that has 49 pastors for over 100, I think 109 is where they're at, preaching stations and congregations. You think they're primarily led by pastors or primarily led by lay leaders in the congregation? Right, lay leaders in the congregation. We're working with people who have generously an 8th grade education. They have all the years, right? You know, they go to school until they're 17, 18, but kind of what we would expect where they're at is an 8th grade, basically an 8th grade level, reading level, comprehension level, things like that. So, but that's not all bad. See, one of the ways I describe working with the pastors and the leaders of Indonesia is like, imagine a confirmation class. Okay? Your 7th, 8th grade confirmation class. Everyone wants to be there, and they're super excited about it. Right? So that's what's happening when it really is a lot of confirmation level type stuff, but everyone is really engaged and happy to hear it. And as we strengthen the congregations, as we help them really with the articulation of the gospel, focusing on the forgiveness of sins, if it's very common to talk about your religion and your faith, that's going to help with the proclamation of the gospel into the communities, right? Christianity is growing in Indonesia, right? When I was doing this presentation in 2018, it was 9.1% Christian. Now it's 10.72. So, and that is, and we can strengthen that with a good, solid message of the forgiveness of sins. All right, because that's what's new, and that's what will always be new, because that's what makes new. All right, now, okay, so there's a total of 20,000 members in the GKLI, but it's really, sometimes I wonder if they're just making stuff up, right? Because I asked them, because their individual congregations don't, this is another cultural thing, right? You go on the LWF website, Lutheran World Foundation website, GKLI's got a page, and I think it says 15 to 20,000 members in the church body, something close to that. But that's not how they count their members. They don't count members, they count families. And so if you talk to a pastor, you say, how many people are at your church? And they'll say, oh, we have 103 families. They're just not, and so we were, COVID shut down the country, and the LCMS we were working with the LCMS for an emergency food relief. Get rice, eggs, oil, get it out there to their congregations and feed the people pronto. One of the difficulties we ran into was the grant application said, how many people will this serve? 300 families. Yeah, but that's not what they want to hear. How many people is it going to serve? 300 families, right? And so it wasn't a problem. We just put 300 families on the application, but it's not what we're used to. It's not the realm we operate in. Even though in America, as traditional Christians, we are very pro-family, right? Absolutely we are, right? But we still have that individual mode of operating. Gary. All right, so how many folks are in a typical family? A typical family is got to be close to 5, right? But once the kids grow up and move out, mom and dad are still a family unit, right? And so the typical family has generally 2-3 kids in it, but even once the kids move out, mom and dad are still a family, and then the kids start new families, and they're counted as family units. And so, yeah, it really is just hard. So in order to convert families to individuals, I would need to know family size, average age, and all this stuff. And otherwise, I'm just making stuff up. So, yeah. Now, these Mentawai Islands, So this is a map of Sumatra. This is the western part of Indonesia, the western island of Indonesia. And off of the west coast of Sumatra are these Mentawai Islands. Now, we talked about how there is no freedom of religion in Indonesia. There are a lot of rules and regulations. One of the regulations is you must belong to a denomination. There are no independent congregations. All right? And so there were 10 congregations in Mentawai that, for various reasons, found themselves outside of their denomination. Okay? Now, they wanted to start a new denomination. To start a new denomination, you need government approval. The majority of religion in Indonesia is not quick to approve new Christian denominations. All right? And so they were facing the closure of their churches because they were illegal churches. And so what happened, they have a Lutheran background. They're familiar with the small catechism, but the Gereja Christian Luther Indonesia, the GKLI, who we work with closely, and these 10 congregations in Mentawai got together, went over a few things, and decided that it would be best if these Mentawai congregations were welcomed into the fellowship of the GKLI. Why is this significant? Because the Gereja Christian Luther Indonesia, up to this point, up to September 2019, was 100% Batak. Now they've always wanted and seen the value and the priority of becoming a church for greater Indonesia. In fact, when they created their name, the Indonesian Christian Lutheran Church, they intentionally left Batak out. The biggest church body in Indonesia is the Huria Batak Christian Church. Protestant Christian. It's Batak words, and I can never remember quite right. But the B stands for Batak. I know that, right? And so the identity is in that it's in that tribal identity, right? There was a point in the LCMS when the LCMS really wanted congregations to name themselves like the German Concordia Church. In fact, when Concordia joined the LCMS, they insisted that that Concordia join not as Concordia Lutheran Church, but Concordia German Lutheran Church. Right? The LCMS has gone through this identity of we're a German church to know we're a church, right? And this GKLI, they have long recognized that priority and that importance of the Christian life, but here they have the opportunity to live it out, and they welcome these non-Batak speaking congregations into their fellowship. Now what does this do? What does this do? If everyone speaks Batak, what are your church meetings in, your church conventions in? Batak. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. If everyone's speaking Batak, speak Batak. The vocabulary is, people can be more precise, and it's just easier. It's fine. But now they have these 10 new congregations from Mentawai, and they're sending leaders to Sihabang for these church conventions, and now what do they have to do? Speak Bahasa Indonesia, right? And so it immediately has this impact, this real concrete impact, and they can see the identity of their church body changing, right? And so as a response to all of this, to seeing this importance, what they have asked us to do is help them create theological resources in Bahasa Indonesia. All right, and that's what we're trying to do. Now, a lot of times the strategy is this, and it's not a wrong strategy. It's not wrong. But a lot of times, like in the Philippines, there's a seminary, and you have to learn English. The pastors in the Philippines need to learn English and then go to the seminary in the Philippines and then go back to the Philippine church. The reason they do that is because once you know English, look how many resources you have. right? Once you know English, you're online and you get logos and you got all these resources that you can understand. And so that's reasonable. I'm saying that's reasonable. In Indonesia, we're happy to have pastors learn English. That we're not saying don't learn English, but we're taking a different approach, trying to get Indonesian resources into Indonesian hands, right? Because they're so lay-led, right? You can't expect the rice farmer or the coffee seller to learn English and then go to seminary. So we want to create resources in Bahasa Indonesia. There really aren't any. Joel Osteen, some of those super mega church evangelical voices, some of that is in Bahasa Indonesia. But other than that, there's not much. So, resources in Bahasa Indonesia. They have had for many years the Bible. Since Bahasa Indonesia has been a thing, they've had the Bible. 20 years ago, maybe they had the Book of Concord translated, which means they also have the small catechism and the large catechism. All right? And now we're working on a worship resource. We are not translating the LSB. Sometimes I frequently hear concerns about the wisdom of translating the LSB into Bahasa Indonesia. That's not what we're doing. We are at the request of the GKLI for help, working with them to create a worship resource in Bahasa Indonesia that takes advantage of what is already familiar to them. So their liturgy is much different than ours. They have a liturgy, but it's so phenomenally different. The benediction is somewhere in the middle. They have singing before and after the sermon. It really focuses on the sermon, and we're maintaining that pattern of worship in this hymnal, and we're maintaining the songs that they know. We are also taking advantage of introducing 50 new hymns into Bahasa Indonesia. One of them is "Of the Father's Love Begotten." Lord, keep us steadfast in your word is new. So, there are hymns that they just need these, right? There's hymns, in my mind, there are songs as Christians that you just have to know. You don't have to like them, I suppose, but it's just such a part of the Christian identity and heritage that I don't have a good conscience if I'm not teaching you these hymns when you're asking about worship, right? So, and then we're also introducing prayers. They're not really used to service books as we have them, right? They have song books, so it's just nothing but songs. And so we're trying to introduce this worship book with prayers and devotion and songs, and we hope, the goal is that this will strengthen the leadership and pastors of the congregation and will help the congregational life in a way that will establish and plant new churches too, and new preaching stations and things like that. Any questions on that? If that was the backside, Buku Ibadah Luther, that's what we call it. Buku Ibadah Luther. So, all right, we're coming up on noon, probably, huh? 5 minutes. Any questions? Carol. No. No, we are, not to say we're not vigilant. We are vigilant. Kelly typically does not go out alone. There are some people that we trust, and we live in a safe area. So she will, take a taxi to the grocery store right, but not walk to the grocery store. That makes sense? The police presence in Indonesia is very different. If something happens, you don't call the police. You call your neighborhood, the head of your neighborhood. Right? Every neighborhood has like a kepala lingkungan, head of the neighborhood. And if something happens, that's who you call. And they kind of get things sorted out. The police are much more of a military presence to quell demonstrations and things that get out of hand. Yeah. But I have never been in a position where I have felt unsafe. But we do take precautions. Well, I mean, I have been in a position where I felt unsafe, but not because of some person, because we were driving through the mountains and there was a cliff on this side and a brick truck on that side and a car coming right here. And, at that moment I felt unsafe, but not in the way you're asking. Yeah. The greatest blessing of being in Indonesia. See, I mentioned this earlier on. Seeing the joy that the churches and the Christians have, and also the non-Christians, just seeing the joy that they can have and maintain with so little. All right, I think of my own Christian life in America and how grumpy and cantankerous I can be as a Christian. I mean, I don't want to tell you all that you're all super angry people, but I just know me, right? And I can come across as very angry and cantankerous as I see the power of Christianity slipping and the influence of Christianity, institutional Christianity on the culture, and it's slipping, and it's easy to fall into bitterness, and it's easy to approach the world as, angry. The Christians in Indonesia have never had power, ever. I mean, this is the largest they've ever been is 10.72% of the population. Right? They don't have political power. That's never been a thing. And so, I don't know, it just creates this, they've also never had money. It's just not, there's not a sense of loss, and there's just this sense of joy in the life of the church. And it's incredibly contagious. And I think that's the biggest blessing, yeah. Yep. Oh, man, I think it's like 70% Protestant and 30% Catholic. The Catholics are very concentrated on one island in the central south part, kind of southeast of Java. Yeah, I don't have a big enough map on here, but most Christians have a somewhere in their identity is the small catechism in Indonesia. And so, I mean, it's a great launching point. Our first English teacher, our first Bahasa Indonesia teacher, pulled out her small catechism. It was in Batak, not in Bahasa Indonesia, but I was talking about the catechism, and she pulled, oh, this thing. Yes, that would be it. Yep. So, yeah. And so I've done seminars on the small catechism in Mentawai. I was able to swing in there right before the COVID regulations in February of 2020. And I went to the Mentawai, those 10 new congregations, and we just had 4 days, and we just went through the catechism. And it was an opportunity to listen as well as teach, right? Because you're going through the catechism, you're going through the basics, and you hear their concerns, and respond to their questions and kind of get an idea of where they're at. So, and again, everyone's super excited and wants to be there, which is part of the joy thing. So, yeah. All right. Now, the other thing on here is support and funding. All international workers through the LCMS are funded by gifts and contributions from congregations and the members of congregations. Okay? I get the same amount from LCMS Incorporated as Concordia Lutheran Church gets from LCMS Incorporated, which is 0. All right? Now, that's not to say I'm not supported by the LCMS. We have tremendous support from the international office. Tremendous support. They have, the office in the International Center have workers who monitor the safety around the world, so I don't have to. They have workers who maintain evacuation insurance and health insurance, so I'm not constantly shopping around for that. They have just the payroll department, so I don't have to do my own payroll. I would not do this. I would not start my own organization, and it would be impossible. This is the only organization that I would work with. It's the Office of International Mission through the LCMS. It is phenomenal. The funding paradigm doesn't come out of the central office. And the LCMS was one of the last church bodies to switch. We funded our missionaries almost until 2002 from offerings. We were the last denomination to be able to do that. But that's just not how missionaries are funded anymore. Right? People want to hear the stories, people want to ask the questions, people want to give to missionaries directly. And that works. It works a lot. It works a lot. It works really well. And so we are in a fantastic place with our funding. All right? But we need to continue to be in that fantastic place. All right? And that all happens through the generosity of churches and church members. And children, come on in. Come on in. So, on the back here, there are 3 ways to give. You have this prayer card was part of the handout. This is online also. On the back, you can fill that out and mail in a check. There are 3 types of gifts. One is I call the special gift. That's a give when you can type of a situation. Give when you think of it. This is, I go out fundraising, someone hears me talk, they send in a gift. Those make up 51% of our giving. So they're important. They are important. They help keep us accountable with communication, right? They keep me telling the story of what God's doing in Indonesia, right? They're important, and we thank God for that type of giving. The challenge with that type of giving is, where am I now? In America, fundraising, not in Indonesia, working with the church there. Other types of gifts are pledging to give monthly or quarterly, or just committing to giving a recurring gift every month. You can set that up through this, and that really helps international workers stay in the field for longer periods of time before coming back home or coming back to the U.S., all right? So, if you wanted to give $100, thank you for the gift. It helps us if you give it $10 a month, right? Because it helps us know that we have a continued engagement with you, right? Hi, sweetheart. So giving over a period of time, it really, really benefits us, because we're in Indonesia, and we know that we have a stream of funds to help keep us there, right? So please consider doing that. Not to say that special gifts aren't important. Like I said, they absolutely are. All right? Any questions, funding-wise or whatever? Yeah, 5 years or longer. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the commitment is 5 years, but I've heard this sentiment a lot. 2020 doesn't count, really. Right? So, yeah, I want to be there as long as there's a need. Now, what would make it so there's not a need for me to be there? That would be a core of theological resources already in Bahasa Indonesia, a solid seminary staff that can teach those resources, and maybe a couple PhD level educated pastors, maybe sent through one of the seminaries here in English, and then back to Indonesia. And then that church body has their own capability to produce the resources from ground up. And maybe they need some help with funding. Maybe they need some help with funding from the LCMS, but they can get those things done on their own. That is many years away, right? At least 7 years. I mean, there's 4 years seminary education and we're not within even a couple years of being able to do that. So yeah, there is a long-term vision and goal for this ministry. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, 5 years is always the minimum commitment of what they call a career international worker, career missionary, 5 years. And that's just the expectation, but it's always indefinite. 5 years is the minimum, but we really want you to stay for as long as you can. And that's what, I'm committed to. Just seeing, there's been a lot of turnover for a lot of different reasons, and just seeing Concordia has experienced this with Pastor Nava coming in and Steve and Joyce dying. That institutional knowledge of how things have been done in the past that you can work with, there's a lot less of that, and makes things more challenging, right? And so the longer you're in a place, the more you know how things have been done. Not to say that's the way you're always going to do them, but maybe you know what not to try again, right? Things like that. And so, yeah, we're in it for the long haul because that's important to us. Yeah. All right. I'm happy to stick around and answer any more questions that you have. So let me know. Also, if you're interested, I didn't get time today, but I have my Indonesian hymn translation work up here. I work to translate a bunch of hymns. If you want to see what that looks like, I have it all kind of divided into different phases, and I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah, Carol. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking me this before, because I pulled it up on my phone, the Indonesian benediction. All right, so how do you say God bless you? Tuhan berkati is a quick God bless. You see that at the end of emails and at the end of conversations, Tuhan berkati. All right, but this is the benediction from Numbers. Tuhan memberkati engkau dan melindungi engkau. Tuhan menyinari engkau dengan wajahnya dan memberi engkau kasih karunia. Tuhan menghadapkan wajahnya kepadamu dan memberi engkau damai sejahtera. Amen. All right. And if you want to know the specifics of that, I did actually understand that in my brain, but I figured it was better to read it and not constantly stop and tell you what each word meant. So, all right. Yes. Thank you very much. Concordia does support us annually from your budget, and we absolutely appreciate that. Oh, watch this. Caroline, ikut ayah. Oh, jangan. All right. Well, with that.